In the secret police, Mubarak's forces are dangerously strong and all too willing to confront dissent. No one is surprised that when the Egyptian people finally erupt into protest, they run into fierce resistance.
All the Egyptian people are not afraid from the army. Even if the army will kill us, we are not afraid.
Protests in Egypt were particularly violent. I mean, there were protesters that were kidnapped, there were protesters that were shot and killed, many more that were put into prison.
Despite the real threat of violence, vast numbers of people stream into Tahrir Square nearly every night, for days. At one point, 250,000 people are in the area. On February 2nd, Mubarak shifts his strategy. He unleashes his own supporters, armed gangs who intimidate and beat the protesters, a smart way to avoid international censure.
This was an attempt by the regime for plausible deniability to ensure that the police and the army didn't get their hands dirty, that the acts of violence were committed by other civilians themselves. And in this sense, it was designed to act as a pressure valve from the regime, but it had the opposite effect.
This battle was the first time we start to doubt the military, because they allowed people to go to attack the protesters.
In the chaos of the day, almost 1,000 people are injured, but the crowd remains determined. By the beginning of February, the UN reports that 300 people have been killed so far in Egypt's uprising. Mubarak's supporters even use camels to attack the crowds. Still, the people gather.
I think the camel battle, it was very brutal and many people died, but it helped the revolution a lot because it changed the people's mind. Actually, more people after this battle, they start to go to protest. And they keep protesting and protesting until even the last Friday. It was on 10th of February. I think it was the hugest protest in the history of Egypt.
As protests spread through Egyptian cities and towns, thousands join the struggle. And it's the sheer weight of those numbers that proves decisive. Mubarak is left with no option.
Mubarak gave a speech saying that he intended not to go anywhere, and then that next morning, the supreme commander of the Egyptian armed forces went on television and said that Mubarak was no longer in charge. So that was symbolically hugely significant and practically significant.
People of Egypt, in the difficult times that our country is going through, the President Mohammed Hosni Mubarak has decided to step down from his post as a president.
The army has removed Mubarak.
They had taken the side of the average man and woman in Egypt, that they were now the protectors of Egypt's democratic future, that they wanted to have no role with Mubarak.